Are you a foreign national thinking of buying a property here in the US to live in? In this video, we're going to share with you different goals that you can have coming up. Hi, this is Kai with the Kai One team, helping you better understand everything you need to know about New York City real estate. Today I have the pleasure of introducing you to Steve MAGGI from the SMA law firm, an immigration attorney here in New York City. How are you doing today, Steve?
I'm doing great, Kai. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So share a little bit about yourself with us.
I'm an immigrant. I came from Argentina when I was 5, just like you.
Okay.
And I decided to dedicate my professional life to helping other immigrants navigate this really complex immigration system. So we have a full-service immigration law firm.
Okay.
And my chief focus and passion is working with foreign entrepreneurs and foreign companies that want to launch here in the United States.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Thanks.
So share with us, we have a lot of international clients that are buying and moving into the US. So what are some goals that they might have that you've seen?
Well, if they want to actually reside in the properties that they invest in, it's important that they have a long-term and a short-term and long-term plan for being here. And that means maintaining their status, and if they want green cards, charting that process all the way through to the end.
Okay.
We have, for example, students. They're the youngest of our clients. They come here on what's called an F1 visa, which allows them to study here in the US at universities. A lot of them then plan to become professionals, but they need to get sponsorship for that. So you're looking at a process that could take anywhere from 4 to 7 years, depending on whether they get what's called optional practical training after they finish. And also if they have a STEM degree, science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, they're eligible for 3 years of work authorization. And while that happens, they're remaining in status and they can be planning their next steps towards permanent residence if that's what they want.
From the student's perspective, when should they start applying for the extension?
They can apply right before they graduate.
Okay.
All they have to do is let the school know, the international division of their school, that they need an extension of their I-20 that has OPT, that has the optional practical training. And then they're required to find a job in the first 90 days of that status. Once they've done that, they can maintain that status throughout.
Oh, wow.
And then if they get sponsored for a work visa, they can apply at any time and transition, or what's called do a change of status to a work visa status.
That's great information. I don't think a lot of students have that foresight to pre-plan, because especially towards the end where you're graduating, that's all you're focusing on. You're not thinking about your immigration status or what you need to do afterwards.
You'd be surprised to know how many students actually come here with the specific goal of getting sponsorship and remaining in the US. There's no room for improvisation here.
Of course.
Especially because under this administration it's getting so difficult to get visa petitions approved. They really need to know, the foreign students need to know what are their options. So the students come here with the intent many times of getting sponsored, but it's very difficult to find sponsors now, and the visas, especially the H-1B visa, are very hard to get approved.
What other goals are there?
If you're a student and you want to be in the US, what you have to think about is whether you're going to be an employee or an entrepreneur.
Okay.
And there are visas available for entrepreneurs, depending on what their country of origin and what passports they hold, to start their own US companies with either funding that they provide or funding from venture capital firms or individuals that will allow them to get a visa to run their own companies, which then create jobs for Americans.
So what I'm hearing from you is, depending on which country you're originating from, it's important to speak with an immigration attorney to find out specifically what options are available for you as an entrepreneur.
Correct. I wanted to say there are also visas available for people from specific countries, but in most cases you would have to apply under what's called the E2 visa, which is applicable to people from 80 different countries or people who hold those passports.
Okay. Wow.
So it's important for, if you're speaking with an immigration attorney, to talk about your options from the beginning. So even while you're here in school, before you graduate and you're eligible for sponsorship, to see if there are specific visas that apply to you to be sponsored that are not H-1B, which is so difficult to get approved.
Yeah.
Or if you're eligible to start your own business and become an entrepreneur.
I haven't heard that before in terms of going about the entrepreneur route on getting your visa as well. What's another goal?
Well, let's say you're a foreign professional.
Okay.
If you're working for a foreign company and that company has a U.S. subsidiary or branch, or they want to launch operations here,
Okay.
and you've worked overseas for that company for at least 1 year, you can do what's called an L1 transfer visa,
Okay.
which allows you to come here for up to 7 years.
Okay.
And it also is a bridge to the what's called EB1 multinational manager or executive green card.
Okay.
And if you're planning that, essentially you want to make sure that the U.S. operation is set up. You have all the financials in place for the foreign company.
Okay.
And you can clearly show that the individual has been working for the foreign company for at least a year. So that's a great opportunity for entrepreneurial type people or for long-term employees overseas that are professionals to come to the U.S., run or work for U.S. operations,
Okay.
and then eventually get their green cards. Their spouses can also qualify for work authorization, and their children under 21 can come with them.
And it's for positions in the managerial and up positions.
Correct. There's another category called specialized knowledge.
Okay.
But this administration is trying to crack down on that position, saying that those positions could be filled by Americans who are properly trained.
Got it.
And so we try to slate people into managerial or executive positions, and their duties should correspond to that so they qualify.
Okay. And then should they be applying while they're still working for the operation in their home country?
They should be applying. There is a rule, though, that says you have to have worked at least 1 year continuously in the past 3 years.
Okay.
So hypothetically, you could be with a different employer and be sponsored by one that you were employed with in the past 3 years that wants to send you to the U.S. as well.
Got it. Okay.
It's a great option for people who are already professionals working in multinational companies because there are no limits on visas and there are no limits in terms of nationality.
Okay, so there's a higher likelihood that they'll be able to be approved for the visa.
Yeah, the stronger the company profile is and the potential for job creation if it exists in the U.S. and you can justify why they should come and how that will lead to job creation,
Okay.
there's a very high probability of success, which can lead to green cards as well.
Any other goals there are as well?
Well, let's say you're somebody that's past professional and you're at the top of your field.
Okay.
What I call the Rockstar green card. It's
Okay.
called EB1 Extraordinary Ability Green Card.
Okay.
And essentially anyone who is at the top of their field, has recognition in the media from their peers, has won awards, can self-sponsor to work in the United States, no matter what their profession is. There's no limits on profession. There's no visa limits. It doesn't matter what country you're from, you can qualify. So if you have a high profile, you're well recognized in your field, and you want to be here permanently, buy your property to live in, then the EB1 Extraordinary Ability Green Card is the best one.
Okay, well, that's interesting because I actually just had a YouTube star come in. If it's a YouTube star for other countries like Brazil or Japan or wherever it is, would that qualify under that category? And how would it be justified if they have celebrity status or if they're a rock star?
Well, it all depends how you classify them. You have to pigeonhole them into business, science, mathematics, whatever their profession is. You have to find where they fit, and then essentially show based on all the categories that in 3 of 10 categories minimum, they qualify in terms of their recognition and the respect and recognition they get from their peers, the media, their standing, awards, etc. There's very clear criteria for that category, so we can essentially go through the checklist with someone and in half an hour assess whether they would be eligible or not. And then essentially you've got a premium processing kind of process where they can know within 2 weeks. We had a case for a German singer that was approved in 2 days.
Oh, wow.
And then you have to go through the actual visa process, immigrant visa process, which can take about a year.
Okay.
But then you can be here permanently and become a citizen and do everything you want. So that's a great option that many people don't think of, and it's wonderful because you don't depend on a sponsor. You're self-sponsoring.
You just need to be a rock star.
Correct. In whatever you do.
In whatever you do.
Right.
Got it. Okay. Are there any other goals that we haven't covered yet?
Yeah, there's one more. Let's say you're an investor. There's a myth out there that if you invest in property, you can get what's called an EB5 green card. That's not true. You have to actually invest in an investment vehicle or a project that creates at least 10 full-time jobs. But you could be not a student, not a professional, not an entrepreneur, not a business owner, none of the 4 categories we talked about, and still qualify as long as you have $500,000 to invest into an EB5 project, which eventually could get you a conditional green card. Once you remove the conditions by showing that the jobs have been created, then you can get a permanent green card.
With the EB5 program, is there a length of time that the funds have to be utilized for? Is it for a certain amount of years or time frame?
Great question. Two things I always say about EB-5. Number one, don't think of it as an investment. Essentially, the investment is in your future and
Correct.
getting green cards for not only you, but for your spouse if you have one, and your children under 21,
Okay.
which doesn't have a price.
Okay.
And the second thing is to make sure that you sign agreements that specify when that investment will be returned. So it depends on the specific investment vehicle, but you can calculate minimum 5 years that those funds cannot be touched.
So just to recap, the 5 categories are students.
Yes, you have people on the F1 visa, hundreds of thousands of students here studying in universities, hoping to get sponsored for jobs.
Okay. Number 2 were employees.
Correct. So a lot of them will be candidates that are here in the US getting their degrees, but a lot of them will also be employees of foreign multinational companies that are being transferred.
Okay. Number 3 were entrepreneurs.
There are 80 countries that qualify for the E2 visa, which allows people to set up their own operations here and self-sponsor through those companies, and those create jobs.
Number 4 were rock stars in their fields.
So rock stars are essentially the people who are at the top of their field and have the recognition to prove that they can qualify for self-sponsored green cards.
And number 5 was EB-5.
EB-5 is an investment platform that allows you to passively invest, at this time $500,000 in a project that will create 10 full-time jobs and get permanent green cards for you and your family.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Kai. It was a pleasure.
And thank you for watching. If you're new here, consider subscribing. On this channel, we share with you market updates, neighborhood guides, and buying and selling tips. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Bye.